So Hank Green did this video that's basically how to get stuff done and then get better at that stuff over time. And he calls it the 80% rule, his secret to productivity. Now when I talk about the 4 reasons about why it's a great idea, as well as a video game you can play that will train you to be good at this idea. The idea of the 80% rule is that you don't do anything to your full 100% capacity. You go to about 80% and save that 20% for something else. And the reason why are these 4 rules. Specifically, if 100% is perfect, nobody knows what perfection is. It's subjective. Like if my favorite color was black and you gave me a white shirt, I'd be like, oh, this shirt's nice, but it's not the best shirt. How would you know that? It's subjective. The second big rule is that there are different categories of best. Like if you ever watch a streamer like Fortnite streamer Laserbeam do a highly edited video that's really interesting Let's Play, or watch Stealth Gamer BR, which has no commentary, no edits, but it's just a beautiful gameplay. They're different. You can't really compare them. The best of each one is really the one that you just like the most. We don't learn what is better until we actually try something. Specifically, it's like throwing a dart. You don't know where that dart's gonna land until you start throwing the dart. And after you throw a couple hundred darts, you're like, oh, I generally have a good idea of how this throw will eventually land on a dartboard, and that teaches you over time. The final 4th reason is that best is always changing. We don't know what you want, what I want, what someone else wants. It changes over time. And so trying to hit that 100% best now is just like, it's gonna be different in just 2 moments. I actually have 2 more reasons that makes the 80% rule really, really good, and I'll talk about those after we talk about the video game. The game behind me is Risk of Rain 2, which is a roguelike, and in roguelikes, you start playing a game, you try to learn as what you can, you try to beat the game and die, and then you start over and you start this process, and every time you play, die, you get a little bit better, and you get a little bit farther in the game. It is a cycle of multiple starts and restarts. This is exactly like the 80% rule. Players don't know what they're going to be getting when they enter the game. There are new characters that you can play with different abilities. You have to learn the abilities. When's the best time to use the ability? What items will you find in the world that will help your abilities? What enemies will be hurt by certain items and certain abilities in the world? What environments are you going to go? There's just so many things that you have to learn while playing the game. Now, Risk of Rain 2 also has a scoreboard about how well you did, but well is pretty subjective here. We talked about the idea that everybody has different categories. Are you just trying to have the most fun? Are you trying to make an interesting build? Are you trying to maximize your score? Risk of Rain 2 doesn't exactly encourage you to only focus on the scoreboard. It gives you tons of achievements and ideas to do whatever the hell you really feel like doing. The point is, there's a million paths to choose on what is best. So you enter in a match and you don't know what's the right thing to do, but you don't sit there trying to figure out what you're gonna do. You just throw the dart. You just start playing the game. You start enjoying it, and regardless of how good that final outcome of something is, you just go and play and have a good time. If you're trying to do 100% in Risk of Rain 2, it would be a total analysis paralysis, where you'd be trying to figure out the perfect way to beat the game as opposed to just having fun. And hey, guess what? When you keep playing the game over and over again, you get one of our first extra rules, which is that the fact is you get better at the game. Every time you start playing, your 80%, which is just you trying to make a good build but experimenting and having a fun time, that 80% becomes way better than the earlier 80% in your first tries. Think about it. You learn about what weapons do what abilities do what, and you eventually have an 80% that's like 500% the first run you ever did in Risk of Rain 2, because you just didn't know the information back then. So it was impossible for you to be able to get something as amazing as you have now because you've built up the experience and skill. And finally, that extra 20% out of that 80% rule thing, first of all, it's kind of a 70 or 30 or 60 or 40. The 80% rule is just kind of the idea that you want to do something that's not quite your full, but it's getting up there. But the main idea is that extra 20% or extra 30% takes about as much time as that initial 80%. Think about it from the perspective of like Forza, where you're racing along and you hit something in a time trial, and the really only thing you can do is rewind the whole thing and start the level over. That's gonna take a lot of extra time. But if you accepted that one little crunch crash in Forza, then you'd be able to finish that match at that 80%. So if you need help with nailing the 80% rule, give Risk of Rain 2 a try. It will help.